Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody joining us today. Thanks so much for attending today's webcast where we are going to be debunking Office 365 myths. My name is Mary Owen, and I'll be helping out our hosts today. They are Christophe Bertrand, who is our VP of Product Marketing here at Arcserve, and we're also joined by Gary Sussman, who is a Principal Pre-Sales Consultant, and he'll be giving us a quick demo of UDP archiving and Arcserve UDP. So as we're going through this, I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. We'd love to hear them from you. So please send them to us using the question section of your interface, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end of the event. Today's webcast is also being recorded, so we'll be sending out an email to you shortly with a link to that recording so you can watch it again if you'd like to. So with all of that out of the way, we're ready, so go ahead and take it away, Christophe.
Thank you, Mary. Hello, everybody, and I'm very pleased to be on this webcast today where we're going to talk quite a bit about Office 365 backup and archiving. There are a number of things you need to know about it. Number one, what we do, but also what maybe you can't really get in specific archiving features with 365 versus having a specialized solution like what we'll talk to you about. I will be joined by Gary Sussman, who's going to demo a couple of our products and solutions so you get a very good sense for what we do. And then we'll take your questions. So don't be shy, ask your questions. We'll try to go through as many as we can at the end. So with this in mind, just before I get started and get into the details, just a quick reminder on how we're doing as a business. We're doing extremely well. Our growth has been fantastic in the past 3.5 years. We've been independent for a bit of time now, and we've acquired with our UDP offering over 27,000 customers. It's been definitely a fantastic success, and we more recently added an archiving module to our offering as well as a cloud offering. But today we'll focus on the archiving piece as well as the backup piece. We've been recognized in many geographies and have received many awards. So again, thank you for all of you, our customers, and thank you to our partners as well for helping us make this company so successful. And let's talk about 365 and some of the trends we see. On the next slide, I've highlighted some of the key market trends that affect backup and recovery, disaster recovery in general terms. One of the big ones, the big rocks, if you will, is the fact that cloud has become very important as a source of data and as a destination. And in the mid-market, it makes things complex because you could be running an environment that is not 100% in cloud, which is fine, actually. Many organizations are hybrid that way. But you may be moving some applications up to the cloud. One of the main things we see on the next slide is the fact that Office 365 is one of these applications that is essentially primarily now run as a service, as a cloud service. So I have some statistics here that recently got from updates from Microsoft as well as a number of sites that report on the growth of the various components. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. I'm not going to bore you with this. If you're not running 365 today, you probably will in the future. It doesn't mean that you don't have email on-premise today. And one of the big challenges is once it's in 360 in the cloud, first of all, what do you do with all of your historical email? And that's an archiving question we'll talk about, because you're not going to pay for all those seats and you don't really need, especially emails from 2, 3, 4 years ago. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, well, if you think you have backup by default, well, guess what? You don't. You don't. There's only going to be so much retention you're going to get in the 365 service, and it will also vary in terms of archiving depending on the plan that you have. So lots of subtleties that you really need to understand. If you think you can just migrate to 365 and everything's going to be fine, and you're going to have your backups and the archiving is going to make you compliant, well, guess what? It's not quite the case. So we're going to help you, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the features we have to help you with that. Your responsibility to back up your data does not go away. Your responsibility to archive and be compliant does not go away, and you need to really understand what it takes to do that. On the next slide, we're going to get into a little bit more of detail on our portfolio. I hinted at this and just wanted to show you where we are today with the Arcserve portfolio. As you can see on the right-hand side, the archiving component has been added, and I also mentioned we've just added another disaster recovery as a service offering, which is a great new engine and service that fits in our portfolio. Our objective is to provide you with enterprise class capabilities, but we want to keep it simple, so everything we do is based on using either workflows or essentially very easy to use web UIs, and we're trying to make and empower the IT generalist to become a great specialist in backup and archiving without having to necessarily have a PhD in those subjects. So backup and recovery, archiving can be very complex, and we want to make that simple and really optimize the ability for you to spend time on everything else you have to do in IT. Moving to the next slide, I want to spend time on the differences that exist between backup and archive. And this is a very important point. That's why we have we acquired a specific engine to do archive, and it's branded Arcserve UDP archiving. So backup is really not about backup, it's about recovery. But backup is a point-in-time image of your data, essentially, okay? And it's really designed for recovery. Now, there are many subtleties and a lot of granularity that comes with this statement. As a matter of fact, you'll see some of that. But the point I'm making is that the backup is going to be used when you have an outage and you're trying to recover a server or a set of hypervisors or whatever the case may be. And typically, you'll use backup in a context of a recovery after a disaster, whether it's, again, a disaster that hurts a facility. If a facility becomes unavailable, a server or multiple servers, maybe it's a logical disaster like ransomware. And you have to go back to a point in time where you can go rebuild those servers with the data or gain access through virtual capabilities to those applications and associated data, something we do very well with Arcserve UDP. The other component of the conversation, and again, this applies to 365. To be clear, I want to repeat, you have to back up your 365 environment. It's not going to get backed up for you automatically. Archive is different. Archive is really about discovery. It's about the collection of what we call data objects. And the purpose is not recovery. The purpose is preservation and retention. And again, there's an aspect of search and discovery that comes with that. It's all intertwined. So in the example we provide here is really the typical example of there's a lawsuit, there's an issue with somebody, there's an HR problem, and you need to go find all of the emails pertaining to the employee in question or wherever that employee has been mentioned. It doesn't matter what the case may be. The idea is that you're going to have to search through a bunch of emails and produce a result that you can then go exploit for purposes associated with mitigating business risk or legal risk, being compliant, etc. So very different objectives. Archiving is really about compliance and business risk, and backup is really about recovery. And again, business risk in many ways, but more the risk of interruption of your business. So on the next slide, just a quick view of what this looks like with our solution. So in the case you have an Exchange server, but you could easily switch that to say 365, and you'll see how we cover that. With a backup, you create a recovery point or a set of recovery points to be precise, then go into the recovery point server, which you could have on premise, you could have it in the cloud, you could have it replicated multiple times. And it's a very similar sort of process in a sense, because you're going from a server to another server, but it's going to be a different engine if you're looking at archiving. Here you're looking at another Exchange server, again, 365, it's equivalent, and you're going to be capturing and ingesting all of the inbound and outbound emails. There are some subtleties here that I will talk about in a second, where you need to make sure that there is specific functionality so that your records are immutable. And guess what? If you get the 365 solution, it doesn't, and even the archiving features, they don't necessarily allow you to do that in a way that's going to make you compliant. Okay, enough said about backup versus archiving. Let's talk about Arcserve UDP. This is a build with 4 quadrants. So on the top right-hand side, you see that Arcserve UDP, the basic architecture is to essentially have a recovery point server. Some of you already use our solution, so all you need to know here is that we can back up physical systems, virtual systems. We do tape backup. We also support, obviously, the 365 as a source. That's really where your primary site comes into play. And if you have multiple sites, branch offices, you can also use an appliance, for example. We offer our solution as an appliance as well. And what's very nice is that our replication is built in. You can, by definition, the minute you replicate the recovery point server to another one, you've achieved a very high level of disaster recovery, because now you have all of your data on multiple sites. You could also have a specialized site. Maybe it's an MSP that provides it to you, or your own disaster recovery site. And you can also go archive to tape, or even better, leverage cloud options, public cloud, private cloud. We support great capabilities in public cloud with Arcserve UDP. And essentially, this gives you a high-level view of our architecture. 365 here would be considered a source, very much like any server or any source data that we back up. It's as simple as that from our perspective. And you'll see that in the interface in a few minutes. So our protection of 365 really eliminates the risk of data loss because of an outage of 365, which has happened. I'm not saying it will happen again, but we all know it's happened, and certainly we see a fantastic level of service. I'm certainly not arguing that point. I'm just saying it could become unavailable for all sorts of reasons. You could also lose access due to regional reasons. Obviously, I'm thinking of the awful weather conditions we have in southeast right now in the south, but it could be all sorts of reasons. If you lose network connectivity or internet connectivity, you've essentially lost access to your email, and well, at that point, you don't really know what's going on, and you may be in a situation where you want to actually go back to a backup because you have specific requirements to do so. The thing we do with UDP is we are very granular. We can back up the various components of 365, just like what we do in Exchange, so the calendars, the contacts, the notes, etc., the tasks, and the public folders. And we'll give you the option of choosing what you want to back up. In some cases, you may decide, you know what, I don't really care about public folders, but I really care about emails and calendars, and notes. And so you pick and choose what you want. And we can back that up to our data store. We have some capabilities coming soon to add even more deduplication, simplicity to the fold, but ultimately just know that Arcserve comes with global source-side deduplication, and we will deduplicate your data. So more to come on the 365 front in the next few weeks. And also, we have a way for you to consume the technology that's going to be aligned with how you like to consume, how you like to buy. So in many cases, if you're thinking about 365, maybe you're more on a subscription sort of model where you want to pay a yearly subscription as you would for many services that are in the cloud. Even if in this case, what you're doing is potentially backing up to your own premises. In other cases, you may be very comfortable with a more traditional perpetual type of model, so we can also support that with our licensing. So lots of options for you there. On the next slide, I will talk to you before we go into the demo piece about UDP archiving and what we've designed it to be and why we acquired this technology and rolled it into our portfolio. There are 3 big reasons. I talked about compliance and regulatory compliance, very important, not to be dismissed. It can cost your business, your organization, a lot of money and a lot of pain, a lot of hurt if you're not compliant. And email is really the big rock. Of course, there's more that comes in the field of archiving, but certainly email is a very, very important part of it, and that's why we focused on it. So we can also mitigate your legal risk. In some cases, you have to be able to demonstrate who's done what, who's talked about what. There may be lawsuits, or there may just be you being preemptive and making sure that, for example, your executive suite's emails are always put in an archive that's going to be immutable. One of the things that's important in order for all of this to work, you have to be able to have great indexing of the environment. You have to have the ability to store everything as an unalterable record. Every email cannot be changed. So essentially, you can't go out and erase anything that's going to be in the archive. In order to do that, you need to be able to ingest whatever you've had historically, but also to ingest whatever's coming in and whatever's going out. And you have to do that so that it can be tampered with, is kind of the point I'm making. You have to be able to be sure that nobody's changed those emails that have come in and gone out. The other thing is, once you have your on-premise, maybe you're migrating to 365, or you're just trying to optimize your on-premise environment with Exchange, it's very same use case. We can ingest those years of emails you don't need. You're not going to put 4 or 5 years of email in 365 if you're migrating. It makes no sense. You don't want to pay for that. So what we'll do is we'll ingest that in our archive, so you'll have it historically, and there's a very simple cost for that in our pricing. And once you've done that, of course, you're now running in 365, which is great, and you can keep ingesting outgoing and incoming emails. The one thing we'll also give you, on the next slide, I'm going to go through some of the architectural aspects and some of the usability. We give you access as an end user to your historical emails through plugins and Outlook plugins, so you know how to use it very easily, or just through a great simple console. Let me talk about the topology very quickly. First of all, this solution, Arcserve UDP archiving, comes as a virtual appliance, so not a physical appliance, a virtual appliance. It can be deployed in VMware Hyper-V or in AWS. So if you're running AWS, you want to run your archiving using this public provider, we support it today. It comes with this design point of being a multi-tenant solution. Let me explain why it matters. You may think, I'm not such a big company, but I don't need multi-tenancy. Well, two things. Some of our partners may want to be providers of this archive service, and having multi-tenancy is important. You may be a larger organization where you have multiple companies or are in multiple countries, and therefore you have to have different views or cuts and essentially different archiving parameters in place. And multi-tenancy helps you with that. Maybe you're not the largest enterprise in the world, but maybe you have a couple of companies in your business where you're vertically integrated and different compliance rules apply to you. Maybe you have different domain names even. Well, all of these are good reasons to have multi-tenancy, and we support it. It works extremely well with any on-premise email server, but also, of course, our cloud 365 being the big one here, source emails, and we're going to be able to ingest all of and connect to that environment and ingest all of the incoming and outgoing emails so that we have them and index all of those so that we have them in the archive. And then in terms of access and how you use the product, there are 4 layers. The employee can only see their own data versus auditors being essentially the people who are going to be searching. Typically, there'll be the legal, the HR. And by the way, to be an auditor, you don't need to be have a PhD in search. If you know a little bit about searching on Google, you know how to use this product. Now, it has some great capabilities like Boolean search and a very granular search options. And that's a big differentiator for us because Office 365 is very basic. I will also point out that to be able to store data as an unalterable record, one of the big rule of thumbs is you have to not be able to remove messages, and employees in 365 can do that. So it doesn't make it a compliant solution for this reason. So something to think about as you go through this. And then in terms of the management piece, and you'll see those in a demo Gary will be doing in a minute, different levels of administration to set up the whole system and then administer the actual archive by domain. So lots of capabilities in this solution, a very simple topology, very simple deployment. On the next slide, I'm going to tell you a little more about some of the summary format. Really, it's 2 dimensions. It's the ease of use and the management. I mentioned the Outlook plugin, so something that lets the end users easily search their own archived email. So they don't have to call you as the IT manager, for example, or the partner managing the environment. You're not going to get a call every time somebody wants something that's in the archive. They can just go look for it, and it's all going to be in their Outlook environment. Very simple. Very little training required, and certainly no sort of hot desk call type of thing. The one thing I want to point out is that you look at all of these capabilities, and I talked about multiple domains and multi-tenancy. These are the type of things that are important. But the policy setting is something that's critical. It cannot be set by an employee. It has to be set by the organization. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to be compliant, and it's not going to be consistent. Employees can set their own policies, and that's a problem. The number of searches you can run. This is about searching as much as it's about archiving. Once you archive, you have to be able to have a very robust index attached to the environment. And by the way, that limits the archiving option of 365. That's why you need this solution, because it's a lot more robust. We can also run multiple searches or concurrent searches, whereas 365 is very limited. I think it's only 2 searches. And we can search the entire archive when we do so, and that's what you want to do if you are trying to do a preemptive search because of risk or some legal risk, or because you have a lawsuit and you need to go make sure you got everything. So 365 is kind of limited in terms of size and mailboxes and can go search. And you know, we do support by design journal email. So great solution in terms of legacy journal data we can import, ingest into the environment. Also, I will finally tell you this. I mean, look, remember the same point I made around backup and having access to your email system. If there's an outage for whatever reason, you need to be able to have access to your archive, and having a separate archive as you would have your own backups is a very important point here that you need to have. So, you know, lots of details here. I'm not going to go into some of the licensing components to this today, but just know that there are more that meets the eye when it comes to 365 in terms of its where archiving is supported. So make sure you have the right license if you're going to use it, and just know also that there's cost, and as I said, it doesn't make you compliant necessarily. We do provide a great archiving solution here, especially for those customers who have an E1 license, and we can give you this enterprise class archive for email that will be extremely easy to use, easy to deploy, and give you help you in your compliance endeavors. So, so look, I mean, here's the deal. We're going to go into the demo in a second. Just want to point out you need to think about this in these terms. 365 archiving, and that's a big myth. It's just not good enough for most organizations, and I think this is very true if you operate as most organizations in a regulated industry. So think about that. At this point, I will turn it over to Gary, who is going to take us through the UDP backup of Office 365, and then I'll jump into the archive after that. So Gary?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, let's get started. As you can see, I have the UDP web-based console already opened up. So UDP is the backup component that we discussed today. UDP stands for Unified Data Protection. There are 3 components with UDP. The first is the console. As you can see, it's a web-based interface. You can access it from anywhere. This provides your single pane of glass to the product. The second component is the backup RPS server, or what we call the recovery point server. This component provides the backup destination. This is the Windows server on-premise that will provide your disk for your recovery point, so your data store. The third and last component is the actual node itself. The solution can provide many different node protection. We can do physical servers. We can do virtual servers. We support Linux, Windows, as well as supporting your hypervisors, VMware, Hyper-V. You can easily import your nodes, physical, virtual, and as well as Office 365. Once you've imported these nodes, you can manage them very easily by groups, or we automatically, as you can see, organize the nodes as such by their plan. So here we have, I've added my Office 365 environment. So UDP can directly access your Office 365 for, again, this protection that we can provide on-premise. Simply, once we establish the environment, the nodes, the RPS, we now can create our plans. Plans is just the workflow and what we're protecting. And for today's presentation, this is my Office 365 plan. So if I decide to create this plan, and I've indicated, again, my user credentials. For Office 365, we do need a server with our agent installed, known as the proxy. It can be the backup server, but you can have other servers, depending on the load. Last thing you want to do is burden your backup server. So keep that in mind. You can have multiple proxies that is going to provide, again, the agent-based protection to your Office 365 environment. As you can see, you can add your sources quite easy into the interface. You can provide your username and password into your environment. So depending on what access or level, it depends on the account that you provide here. So keep in mind, ensure that you have an account that's discoverable, especially if you want an organization's view of your emails. As you can see, I just provide my own, and I only have access to my own user. Once you've added the user, down below you can also select what to protect. You can back up all folders, or in my case, I only am selecting to back up the inbox. So very selectable what to back up as well. So that's the first aspect of protecting Office 365 with Arcserve UDP, is acknowledging the source. Once we've acknowledged the source, we can now specify the on-premise backup server, again, the RPS server. This is the server that will provide the backup target, the destination, the data store. You can then next provide your schedule. Schedule allows you to indicate when, and most important, how much to keep of that retention. So if I want 30 days of backups, I can put 30 days for my dailies. I also can do weeklies. UDP can do backups every 15 minutes. We can provide either custom backups every 15 minutes, or your traditional daily, weekly, and monthly. All of the above allow you to protect your environment. You can also acknowledge the retention down here. The products automatically merge your retention. So if I have 7 dailies on the 8th day, the merge will again keep the data consistent. It's a synthetic full operation. Merges can also be scheduled as well as throttled for your backups. So this is how we can protect your Office 365, scheduling it accordingly. And as well, we can do other commands, pre and post commands, and also email alerts. So that's it. This is the 4 steps in providing data protection with Arcserve UDP of Office 365. First, we need to account the source, specify the destination, which is the Arcserve UDP RPS server, scheduling when to do backups, and then we can do other commands as well. But it doesn't stop there. Once we have a backup, you notice I can add other tasks. UDP shines in providing other cases, other things you can do. In this example, I could copy the recovery point. Maybe I want to not have a single point of failure. Maybe I have a USB disk or NAS or the cloud, for example. I can utilize now the backup and copy to an alternative source. Maybe I have a USB disk that every Friday I want to take home with me, just to, in case, provide and avoid single point of failure. So again, copy recovery point can provide all of this, including encryption, compression, providing a VHD format for your Hyper-V environments. And then finally, we can schedule how often, and most importantly, how much data to keep on that resource. So if every Friday I want a week's worth backup, I can simply add my copy recovery point strategy, just like this. So copy recovery point provides, again, a way to avoid that single point of failure with your backups. You can also add additional tasks as well. For those that need tape, we do have copy to tape options. We utilize Arcserve backup for that. And then finally, replication. Whether you have a point-to-point VPN environment, or you have disparate environments with multiple consoles, whatever the case may be, the product can replicate and, again, save your data. We can replicate to another recovery point server that is also managed by the console or by another console. Simply just drop down and choose now that remote target. This is how we can provide replication of now your Office 365 data. Replication has a synchronization that we now can do between the RPS servers. So as you can see, my manager locally is synchronizing with my replica, RPS-R. Synchronization allows us to know what's on the other side, so we are WAN optimized. We can also offline our replication synchronization process. So if your bandwidth is not big enough, we could do a simple jumpstart progress to offline replication. And even if we have some failures or disconnection, the thing about replication is the job will take off where it last left off. Finally, we could do our replication schedule. Also merge, since this replica has its own database hash. Maybe we want to keep more retention or less retention. Again, the RPS on the remote side handles all of that. Finally, also we can do additional alerts. So this is how easy it is to set up an Office 365. Also provide multiple cases of avoidance reporting failure. Definitely in an environment we're in with these attacks we have, especially ransomware. So that's about it for the Office 365 backup end. We now will go on to our email archive. As you can see, the email archive also is a web interface. Once installed, the archiving solution provides many different types of access. As you see, I'm logged in as my domain admin. At this account, I can see and manage, monitor the whole environment. As the domain admin, I can first monitor via dashboard the solution. With the dashboard you can see here, I can make sure that everything is acknowledged by accident. Logged off, let me log back in. So depending on the user account will give you what access you have. If I'm an auditor, I will only have the search capabilities, for example. But logging as the domain user here, I'll have superb access.
It is so secure, I can't even get into it.
I forgot a cap, so I apologize. These passwords are too long. Oh boy. Capital. Yeah. Okay, we're back. So as I'm logged in as my admin, the first thing you're looking at is my dashboard. This accounts for everything that's been processed either by last hour, by last day. Very, very detailed. You can account for a monthly report and visually see what's been digested. Very cool. Secondly, we can see from an archive standpoint what's been going on in the environment. So all the emails that have been accounted for today, you can even search from here if you like as an administrator. So very detailed, you can see what's going on in your organization from a glance. Audit, basically you can detail who's done what. Joe Blow, you can see what exactly we've done. So for example, you can see how many times I've logged out today, or whoever's done what and when, You can even search for maybe a particular user to count for his work today. You can also export all this detail as well.
And Gary, just to be clear for everybody listening, as an admin, you can't really see the emails. You have to be an auditor to see any of the emails, or the end user with you're looking at your own email. Perfect. Yeah. Exactly. Just wanted to clarify that.
Exactly. As an administrator, this is where I can add my user to the interface. We do provide role-based administration, so you can detail who has access to what, if it's an employee or, again, an auditor. So again, you can provide the role and what accounts for what they have access to the interface just by adding them right from here. So as you can see, I've had my domain, a user, and an auditor, which will show you the difference between the screens. Groups is a great way to account for maybe a department. So if you have a department like HR, you can create groups and assign users into that group so they can all share that email or that accountability, for example. If Mary is on, just had a baby, she's no longer here, she's taking care of her family, another person in this group will have that same level. So either managing users or entire groups is a capability you have within the product. For those that are going to be more MSP or manage this as a service, this is how we can manage our multiple domains. So as MSP, I maybe want to account for a practice for email archiving. I can manage different domains and, again, account for users in them as well. So whether you're a single SMB or enterprise user, again, this interface accounts for whoever you are. We also can account for Active Directory. We can enable LDAP. We can import ingest as well. We also can make exception rules, maybe certain emails we don't want to be archived, and as well as retention. How long are you going to keep your emails for? You can, again, keep them for however long. Maybe the CEO, you want to keep longer than your average user, whatever it may be. Retention rules is very easy to create within the product. Lastly is legal holds. Again, we're accounting for who will be providing this capability. So again, once we index the solution, we have lots of capabilities in providing the capability of finding and keeping that information for a period of time. So this is where we can account for that as well. So what I'm going to do right now is log off. Actually, I'm just going to go to my other browser here and log in as an auditor so you can see the differences and the different search capabilities that I have. And I'll remember this time for the caps. All right. Oh, looks like I logged in as the wrong user again. And good idea to save my passwords. Let me log in as, I did log in as auditor. Okay, yeah, here we go. So as an auditor, again, my idea here is to be able to provide, search capabilities. So this is exactly how I can do that. I can enter whatever search criteria right from here. I even have the capability to do more advanced searches. Maybe I only selected on an attachment, so I can search all Word documents. I can search from a time range, from whatever range I wish. I can even provide capabilities from a particular tag, whether it's in email, from or to, subject tag, whatever the case may be. This is how detailed we can search for our emails in our index. As you can see, I can save the searches, and once the searches are done, which you can see here, I can account for them. I can always go back and get that detail. I can, once searches are found, I can then download all or maybe only a few. I can also tag. Maybe these are for a new HR issue. So issue number whatever. So I now tag so I know exactly what these pertain to. You even can do notes. So you can get more detail, enter notes, and save them so you're reminded, oh, this is what this is for. So again, a lot of great detail from a searching aspect within the product. As well as an auditor, once you've completed your searches, you also have auditing, so you can see what's been done previously. Here you can also search user IP address or an action. As well as we have those same searches that you saw earlier. So for example, here's a search I did on UDP. So here are all of the aspects of emails that count for that UDP. So very easy to account for what we've done in the past, and very easy to do new searches as well. Very, very detailed. As an auditor, I can reference things as well. It's a lot of great detail. I can also log out and provide additional settings depending on my usage. I can do different formats, different languages, how many results per page, and also provide access to enable managing my passwords, and you can even update a picture if you like. So again, this is how Arcserve shines, and now providing solutions for backups of Office 365, but also archiving with email. And one thing I like to stress with the archiving, it provides storage management. So all these emails with the same attachments, we'll only adjust it the first time. So we'll save on that storage usage. So just definitely keep that in mind. So that does it all for me. Hopefully it makes sense. One thing I could not show you today is the Outlook plugin. We do have an Outlook plugin for your Outlook application. Because I'm doing everything via the web, unfortunately I don't have my Outlook account, or I should say application, so I can't show you that. But again, users have access via their own Outlook application to a plugin. Even they can access their own searches. They can do whatever they need. They don't have to rely on the IT staff to get emails that they might have lost. So just keep that in mind. Outlook plugin is included as well with this product. All right. Well, Christoph, is there anything else that I missed, or you'd like me to discuss more about the two solutions?
Well, thank you very much. So yeah, so please go ahead if you have questions. Keep adding them. Look at the questions tab, and just type your question in there, and we'll try to answer your question. So in terms of pricing, just question that just came through, and then I'll go to some of the other questions we received. To get pricing, please go ahead and get in touch with us, either the Arcserve sales number or through our partners, and then we can, based on your environment, give you more details. So absolutely, and again, the licensing will vary depending on whether you're talking about UDP or the archiving module. There's another question asking whether you can run the archiving solution if you have an environment that has a different backup solution than UDP. And so, of course, we want everybody to use UDP, but it could be that you have another backup solution running, or in one of your companies or organizations, another solution where you haven't standardized yet. And yes, this is independent from UDP in terms of licensing and setup, so you can run the archiving piece only if that's what you decide to do. The other question that's related to this is, yes, we will be unifying everything into the console. So stay tuned. We're working on that, but expect that this is still a new solution that we announced. I would say 2 months, 3 months ago. So it's going to take us a few more weeks and months to get that fully integrated. But in time, think of it as a unified platform where you'll have access to the functionality and the capability you require from one interface. And of course, we're also looking at web-based type of consoles, etc. So stay tuned on that. But yes, it will be integrated. But it is a separately licensed solution for the archiving piece. So definitely something you can purchase today separately. And this management, again, piece will not take very long. We're looking at it in in the next few months as something we want to provide to you from an access standpoint. But as you can see, it's a web-based solution. So really, when you think about it, especially if you are looking at empowering your auditors, so maybe your HR, your legal, I think you don't necessarily want them to be in a backup and recovery console. You do want them to be using, as Gary showed us, the web-based GUI. That's just a lot easier. Gary, question on the backup, since you're playing with your Arcserve UDP backup here. On 365, can you recover specific granular components when you recover if you have a problem?
Most definitely. Basically, what we can do, you can pick a point in time, being that you have a backup, of course. We provide a tool to provide access to every aspect of that Exchange environment. We can do searches. You can export to PST. So lots of capabilities from a granular recovery standpoint, depending on your needs.
Perfect. And I would like to add, and please confirm, Gary, but this is the same as the Exchange on-premise. We can do the same with Exchange on-premise. Yes. So if you're on 365 or on-premise, you get the same functionality. It's kind of the very cool thing about it. Sure. Great. Thank you. Okay. There was another question around that's an archive question. So this is an interesting one. Let me maybe rephrase it a little bit. How many results do you get when you do a search? So what I'm trying to so I guess the answer is this. If you do a search with our solution, with the Arcserve UDP archiving, you will get everything that you've searched for. Whereas, you know, in Office 365, there's a limit. It will actually limit to 250 items by default. So the client is configured in 365 archive option to a maximum of 250, right? So you can bypass that, by the way. So, but you have to configure, I believe, each individual Outlook client. So it's kind of a weird limitation. So I'm not sure whether that's why you're asking the question, but I could see why somebody would ask the question. So when you search with Arcserve UDP 3, archiving your 365 environment, your archive, we will return every result that pertains to that to the search in question. And by the way, I would like to add one more time that we support very advanced searches. Something that again has an influence on your ability to be successful and compliant. Let me look at additional questions here. Okay, what happens when there is a cloud outage? So yeah, so that's kind of what I was covering. If there's an outage of the solution you're running from in terms of source, so Office 365, you don't have email, and you essentially are not going to be able to archive anymore. So essentially, you're sort of without access. That's where you need a backup. So should anything come up and should come back with some issues, or should you have lost emails after the outage, realize you have lost emails, then you can use UDP for backup and recovery, and then recover whatever emails you've lost. And you also have the historical archive, so that still guarantees your compliance, because we're going to keep ingesting whatever comes in, whatever goes out. If the system is down, well, there's no ingestion, but at least it's in your archive. Do legal holds or archive time requirements take over when storage is full? So that's a good question. I will say, first of all, let me make a first statement. This, in the archiving component, it's very easy to dynamically add storage, and we will give you warnings, and I think you've seen what Gary was doing with the graph and showing you the status of the environment. So yeah, you should absolutely add storage. And legal holds, yes, will mean that we will just keep those in place. And then if you don't have a lot of space, we start ingesting. But Gary, we haven't seen that case yet, and clearly you never want to run out of space, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. So, is there government pricing? Yes, that's a good question. Please give us a call. We support government pricing through our partnerships and our distribution. Okay, there's another question. Can you recover specific pieces of data from the archive data? I will say on this one, two things. First of all, you can search for attachments as well. So that's kind of where you're going with this question. So yes, you could really recover. You will recover the email, but you can also search for. Again, you're going to be searching terms, or you're going to be searching for attachments. So this is how specific it gets, right, from that perspective. Now, within, the archive, it's not archived data as much as it's archived objects, and these objects are emails. Okay, and yes, in terms of format, they're Gary, can you confirm they're saved in native format, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So, okay, what about newly migrated users? Do they have to be added manually? I'm not sure I know the answer to this one. Gary, do you know?
Repeat that one again.
Yeah, what about newly migrated users? Do they have to be added manually? I think it's automatically synced with email.
Yeah, As long as you have the account at a higher level than that user, then you should have no problem.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah. Do you have dynamic throttle schedules? So I'm not sure whether that's for backup or for archiving. So I'll let you answer, Gary.
It's definitely backup. You wouldn't want to throttle your ingestion. There's no throttling. It just happens. But definitely the backups you can throttle, for example, from 8 to 5. Throttle backups, so obviously the business doesn't suffer. So most definitely from a backup and also replication, you can throttle the bandwidth as well.
Perfect. Thank you. A question that came through a few minutes ago here. You just mentioned the functionality we saw today also being available for on-prem Exchange. So if we currently are running Exchange on-prem but are planning on moving to 365, what options do we have for Arcserve licensing? Would we need separate licenses, or would one license be able to be applied before and after the transition? Can you answer this, Gary, without more details? Or
yeah, it really depends on if you have UDP. It depends on what version you have and what type of license we have. Like, for example, the capacity license includes that. In fact, I think it was in one of the slides here. It's included in the capacity license, and it's also included in one of the type of there it is. Lastly, the appliance. There it is. So we do have per mailbox. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Yep, just making sure. We also have a per mailbox. And that's for UDP.
Right. And that's, yeah. See, for archiving, that's why we would need to have a chat. For archiving, you have the ability to do historical ingest, which would apply to this case.
Correct.
So this is, for your question, there's a backup component to it, and then there's the archiving component to it. You would do, in this case, you would ingest, and then after that, you would then be paying by, you have a couple of options for archiving. You can go perpetual, or you can go by mailbox. So very flexible from that standpoint. So I'm going to take your question as being more for archiving, but you have the answer for both backup and archiving. I see we have just a couple more minutes left here. Let me take maybe a couple more questions. So yes, there's a question, does it archive calendar tasks and contacts? And yes, it does. I think that was probably asked before I covered it and before we got the demo. Do you think employees will want to or understand how to look into their own archives? And I will tell you, yes, absolutely, because the Outlook plugin is going to be
It is really easy. It's really easy.
Yeah, it's just like using Outlook. I mean, candidly,
yeah.
You click on it and you go do your searches. The reality is that unless you have employees, and again, remember, employees who want to go back, think about your own use. I mean, how many times you go back to an email that's more than a few weeks old, unless you have a business where, or you're in a position where every year you do something, so you go back to last year's or you want to 2 years ago. So I think there's probably not a lot of appetite for going back to 3-4-year-old email to begin with, but you need to have them in the archive. So as an employee, that is, but you still have this ability, and it's very simple, super easy to search, and you don't need special training. Okay, how often do you hear of companies having to go back to legal hold? Well, I will say all the time. That's why you would do using archiving a solution, because you never know what's going to hit you. So give you a couple of use cases or examples I actually heard recently. Number one company that is in military contracts. So by law or by contract, they have to essentially archive everything and every communication. So that's defense type of stuff. So that means it's legal hold, pretty much. And the other is very simply the traditional use case is the lawsuits. So I mean, you can imagine what happens if you have a lawsuit. You're going to be able to, you're going to want to freeze everything that may pertain to it, so you can go search it, or your lawyers can go search it. By the way, in terms of cost, you really want to remember you can easily deliver those results to your legal team very easily because you can export. It saves a lot of money given the high costs per hour of these professionals. What industries work best for your product? So again, for backup and both backup and archiving, there's no real specific industry where we don't recommend it. The one exception I would say for archiving will be there are some, for enterprise, very large enterprises, we may not have the feature set we need because there are some things we don't do. And for very specific financial sector applications, like I think hedge funds and things like that, we may not have all of the features you need. But except for those very few exceptions, which we can walk you through, we are essentially horizontal. So, and there's another question on SMB and education. Yes, we do. This works really well for SMB, education sectors. No problem there. It's definitely something that would be very useful, especially if you have many people using the archive, and then the change every year or every 2 years, whatever the case may be. So it's good to have these archives. So I think that's pretty much what we have time for today. We'll turn it over now to Mary for closing.
All right. Thank you so much for that great presentation, Christophe, and for the demos, Gary. Thanks again to our attendees for spending this time with us. We'll be sending out a recording of this webcast, so keep an eye out for that. And if you have any additional questions, please reach out to us at arcserve.com. On the site, you can download a trial of Arcserve UDP and Arcserve UDP archiving. You can chat with us live, or you can find our phone number so you can give us a call. So thanks again, everyone, for spending this time with us. Have a great rest of your day.